All right. Welcome to our webinar, Media Literacy. We are focusing on grades 3 through 5. So this is the second webinar in our series. We did one for secondary level students weeks ago, and we have one coming up in about a month focused on early learning. So I'm Nick Ostrom. I work for PBS Wisconsin. I work in the Education Engagement Department, focusing on professional development for educators, and I mostly focus on media literacy and media production with students. And I'm here with Debbie. Do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure, I'm Debbie Burmeister. I'm a recently retired elementary school teacher out of the Neenah Joint School District. And my very last year of school, I decided to become a certified media literacy educator to give me something new to grow, even though it was my last year. And it was one of the best things I ever did.
All right. So real quick, this is what we're going to talk about today. Obviously media literacy covers a lot of stuff. It's a really big topic. So we narrowed it down to a few select things. We're going to talk a little bit about media literacy generally and what that is. And then we're going to talk about codes of conduct, which is kind of digital citizenship. We're going to talk about evaluating online information. We're going to talk about analyzing media with students. And then we're going to talk about making media. So what is media literacy? So the National Association for Media Literacy Education has this definition, which is the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, create, and act using all forms of communication. So that's super clear, right? What does that actually mean? So look at the end of that sentence, all forms of communication. So that's really important. This is really any form of media. So everything from the written word to video, audio, photos, really any format you can think of. And it's how to access it. So how are you finding those things, those resources? How do you analyze the media itself, both the content of the media, but also the format itself? So what choices is the creator making? How do you evaluate it? So how do you figure out if you can trust the information? How are you figuring out credibility and reliability? And create. And that's something that sometimes gets overlooked when you're talking about media literacy. Too often it's analyzing media or analyzing information, and it's not creating media. So we wanted to make sure we spend the second half of this webinar talking about media creation, both educators creating media as part of their instruction, but also students themselves creating media. And then they have the word act. How do you act on it? So, does this media have a call to action? Is it asking you to do something? How do you react to it? Or how do you interact with it in some cases? So why learn about media literacy? Chances are if you join this webinar, you don't need to be convinced too much. So I'm not gonna, try to make an argument, but really these are lifelong skills. These are real world skills. This is critical thinking. This is figuring out what you can trust. How do you evaluate information? People's lives are full of media, now more than ever. And how do you look at that through a critical lens and really be thoughtful of what you're getting out of it? And these are things that need to be practiced. You can't just do it once. These are it's just like any skill. You have to practice and do it consistently. So kind of the background here for us is a lot of our information comes from this PBS Media Literacy certification. That's the certification that Debbie mentioned at the beginning. This is
Oops. I think Nick, hopefully Nick comes back.
I am here, don't worry.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Just one second, I'll bring my screen back.
There it goes.
PBS Media Literacy certification is a program that you can do on your own. It's self-guided, or you could do it as part of a cohort with other educators. And here at PBS Wisconsin, we manage our own cohort. So every school year, we have a team of educators who go through the certification on their together, meeting on Zoom once a month, and basically completing 8 micro credentials together. And one of the reasons I want to bring this up is I want to show you what these 8 micro credentials are, because this shows really just the broad range of types of media literacy. And you can see, where we kind of came up with the structure of this webinar. So we're going to talk about codes of conduct. What are the expectations for behavior online? Evaluating online information. Of course, that's things like fact checking, being critical of misinformation. That's something people often consider synonymous with media literacy. But I do want to make the point media literacy is much broader than that. Evaluating online tools for classroom use. So what that means is looking at things like the terms of service for software you're using. How are the apps you're using in school use or protect student privacy, and how is that reflected in federal laws like FERPA? Something that's often overlooked when we're talking about media literacy. So there's a whole credential focused on that. And of course, analyzing media, we're going to talk about that for a good chunk of our webinar today. And then the bottom row here, these are all focused on making media. So everything from images, infographics, we'll talk about that later, and audio and video. And those are mostly focused on educators making media for their classroom as part of their instruction. And then what we call implementing media projects, that's where the students themselves make media. And then of course, assessment, how do we assess media projects and how is that different from other forms of assessment? So let's dive into our content for today. I wanted to start out by talking about codes of conduct because this might be the most accessible way to introduce media literacy concepts, because chances are you already have something like this. This isn't new. A lot of districts, schools, classrooms have some code of conduct, even if it's called something different. It's the set of expectations. But the way we do it and the way we encourage educators to do it is to make it collaborative. So it isn't like, it's not like a legal document that is given to students. It should be written in a language that they understand. So whatever grade level you're teaching, get buy-in from the students. And I'm actually going to show you an example of one that one of our certified educators made. So they look at it through the lens of a digital citizen. So on the left column, it says, as a digital citizen, I will do the following: keep my personal information private, for example, treat everyone with respect. So these are things you probably already have when you think about your expectations of your students, but working together to really put it in writing as a group, is a great way to introduce these concepts. And one I want to point out in that left column, second from the bottom, it says, I will credit my sources that I use to learn and research. So you're getting into issues of copyright, plagiarism, really broader topics. But this is just a really simple entry point into those. And then on the right column, it says, as a digital citizen, I understand. I like the second one. Some things on the internet are not true, which is kind of an understatement. But that's getting to the point of evaluating information, which is such an integral part of media literacy. So, when students are thinking about the code of conduct they have or working on creating one together, they're not thinking, oh, this is the media literacy unit, I'm learning about media literacy. These are just things they have to do. But great introductory way to get these concepts in the classroom.
So Nick, and the rest of you, the school I was at was a PBIS school. So we use that terminology to help build our code of conduct. So my fourth graders actually used their verbiage from PBIS that we did all the time. And we created our own classroom code of conduct and used it throughout the school year. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Use what you have or use what you know. The kids know the right from wrong. You dig in deeper so that they get a better understanding of their code of conduct, because it's not just, take care of your school supplies. Well, how do we do that? Be more specific. And we used PBIS terminology for that, but it could be any terminology that you have special for your 3-5s.
So let's talk about evaluating online information. This is something that, like I said, comes up a lot in media literacy, but at least I've found so many of the resources out there are focused on older students. They're focused on high school students. So I want to talk a little bit about doing that at the elementary level. That's something that people often use to be synonymous with media literacy. Often when I talk to people and I say media literacy, they think, well, oh, it's identifying misinformation, or looking at news sources and finding bias, or sometimes people use the phrase fake news, things like that. And then, I look at the resources available out there, and so much of it is high school, maybe middle school. So it's something that's often overlooked for the younger grades, but there are some really good ways to do that at the younger grade levels.
There we go.
Thank you, Jamie. Could you go ahead to the NewsHour slide? I want to show a clip. This is from a PBS NewsHour report. We're going to show just the first 3 minutes because it's about 7 minutes long, but just the first 3 minutes, it shows some of these ideas being implemented in a 3rd grade classroom as part of their history unit, where they're looking at historic newspapers to look at bias in sources. So if you click the image right there, it's not embedded, but if you click on the image, it'll take you to the clip.
But first, helping children distinguish between false information and fact-based news. It is a distinction increasingly a problem for adults. And to be clear, we're referring to false information disguised as a legitimate news story, not reporting that people dislike for political reasons and label fake news. In Washington state, educators and media literacy advocates have joined together with legislators to address the problem. Special correspondent Kavitha Cardoza with our partner Education Week traveled there recently. It's part of our weekly series, Making the Grade.
This was the front page of the Seattle Post-Intelligencer.
Niamh O'Connell's 3rd grade history class at Birchie School is analysing old news stories, looking for evidence of bias.
People, if they don't know how to analyze it, will just say, oh, wow, that's true.
Fred Cotton looks at the choice of words used in a story about Japanese internment camps during World War II.
Notice how they're wording it Japanese instead of Japanese Americans.
What was the purpose of that? Why did they do that?
The purpose was to say, oh, we're not imprisoning American citizens. Well, as they would put it, we're not evacuating American citizens, we're evacuating Japanese.
And why did they use the word evacuate?
Another student also notices the language.
I saw some fake advertising for the Japanese internment camps. They said they were assembly centers.
So they kind of made it seem really cool, and actually it wasn't.
Yeah.
O'Connell uses examples from the past so these kids can become smarter about media messages in the present, even though they're only 8 years old.
I want to learn how to analyze it myself and have my own opinion.
They soak up everything around them. I think it's important for kids to be able to control the interpretations that they hear and see every day instead of the interpretations maybe controlling them.
Recognizing bias in news stories is one form of media literacy. Spotting when the news is entirely fabricated, like these stories, is something else entirely. Often these stories are designed to look as if they come from legitimate news organizations and are meant to be easily shared on social media, resulting in confusion over what's real. During the recent election season, there have been reports of a concerted effort to spread fake news in a bid to influence public opinion. A recent Stanford University study of almost 8,000 students showed they were easily duped online. Researchers found overall, young people's ability to reason about the information on the internet can be summed up in one word: bleak.
You can stop.
You've
Jamie,
been
thank
working
you.
on media literacy for how long?
About 40 years.
Claire B.
So, the rest of the report's really interesting, but they kind of move into older students. So I just wanted to show the beginning of a way to implement this with third graders. I'm going to pass it over. If you go to the next slide, I'm going to pass it to Debbie so she can give an example of how she evaluated information in her classroom.
So I worked with our library media specialist, and we came up with, or we found this acronym. I shouldn't say we came up with it. We found this acronym, and it was called REAL, REAL. So when we gave some information to our students, they had to read the URL to make sure it was reliable. What did they know? How did they know that? They had to examine all the content that was available to them in this website or wherever they were looking. They had to ask about the author and the copyright date, because sometimes the author is not a credible person, or it's made up person. They don't even know who this author is, or the copyright date doesn't make sense. It doesn't go along with the item that they're looking up. And then of course we had to look at all the links that were attached to it. And they had to click on those links. They had to see if they were reliable links, because sometimes they take you to some not so great places. So my kids went through this using a graphic organizer, and they had to, in groups, work to evaluate the information they were looking at. And I think there's an example next. Oh, that's right. Next little video.
If you go back a slide and click on that screenshot, it'll take you to the lesson.
Thanks, Nick.
Yeah.
All right, so, Jamie, go slide down a little bit. Keep going. Keep going. So this is the graphic organizers that my students had to fill out. So they had to, I created a series of, I used Wakelet and a series of sites, and they had to go to those websites and evaluate that information. And my students, they dug deep. They were looking, and we practiced, don't get me wrong, they didn't just randomly go and do this, but we practiced as a class. And then they did it, and they were much harder on the things than I would have been. We're pretty good at looking at this. We really slowed them down, and my students were able to really critique and understand what was happening in those websites, to know if it was a good site for them to use, or this was definitely, because there's a lot of stuff on the internet that is not appropriate, that I purposely put out there for them so that they would recognize that, because they have to recognize the bad with the good.
All right, so next we're going to show a little clip of an animated series. This is called Ruff Ruffman. He's known as the humble media genius from PBS Learning Media. So this is a series of videos about a dog. I think he's a dog, right? Yeah, he's a dog. Who kind of explores different media topics and online life. And it's a fun way. It's kind of silly. Depending on the age, you can gauge whether it's, your kids would like it, but it's only a few minutes long, and there's a whole series. So we're just going to show one example. This one's about searching on the internet.
Ruff Ruffman, humble media genius. Searching and you. Nowadays, it's easier than ever to search for things. Whether you're doing homework or shopping or just looking for fun stuff, the internet can bring it right to you. If you know how to be a good detective and search like a pro. Oh, hey, just settling a friendly bet. Are dogs or cats better? Okay, let's see what we got here. Cats are better than dogs? No doubt about it! Sorry, Blossom, but cats cannot be better than dogs. I mean, what website is this anyway? Let's see. Name at the top there says catsarethe.best.com. Well, now that seems a tad suspicious. I'm going to look at the About section to see who made this website. Blossom? Well, no wonder this site is all cat this, cat that. No offense. Of course. I mean, I get it. You're a cat. You should be into cat stuff and all that. Just saying, slightly skewed. Awkward. Oh, hi. We took a survey, and a lot of you said you use Google and Bing to search for information on the internet. Jet here will help me explain how a search engine works. Now, this is my closet. Inside, there's a lot of stuff. Kind of like on the internet. If I looked at everything in there at once, I could never find anything. But Chet goes in there all the time, and he knows where everything is. So Chet is kind of like a search engine. Okay, Chet, bring me a cone. I need the cones for this ice cream. It's a surprise for Chet. Shh. Chet, I meant an ice cream cone, not a traffic cone. What? Oh, I know, I wasn't specific enough. Sorry about that, buddy. Now, can you please go get the ice cream cones? Important lesson there. When searching, use extra words to make sure you get what you want. Now that's more like it. Great searching, Chet. With so much information out there, it's important to learn how to search like an internet detective. And my detective skills tell me it's time to dance. Chet, music, please.
Hello, it's crazy.
So one of the things I like about that is the emphasis on searching. And if you want to get a little more advanced and talk about how search engines work, different techniques for searching, being able to do a good search is a real skill. And it's a skill a lot of kids and I'd say a lot of people don't have. So, Google's not just a magic thing that gives you the answer to everything. You really have to know how to use it, know how it works. And when you're evaluating information, one of the big things to talk about is corroboration. What other sources out there can you find, and how do you find those other sources? Well, you need to know how to search to back up or debunk things that you're finding. So let's move on. Let's move on to the next slide. I think we're going to move on to media analysis. So a real quick distinction here, we talk about evaluating information and then we talk about media analysis. The difference between those two things is when we're evaluating information, we're looking at the information itself, the credibility of the information that's being conveyed. Media analysis, we're talking about the medium itself. So what is being presented? What choices is the creator making to depict this information, not necessarily the credibility of the information itself. Of course, those two things are intertwined. You're often doing both at the same time, but just for the purposes of structuring this, that's the division we're making. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so now, information is shared in so many ways. Videos, infographics, podcasts, memes. I mean, students are just inundated with this stuff, and the older they get, the more stuff there is. So being able to read, this is where media literacy, we have the word literacy in there. How do they read those formats and those different forms of media? And how is that different than, you do that traditionally if it's just you're reading something written? Let's go ahead to the next slide. Okay, so this is some information that comes from KQED. They have a lot of great tips. How do you make connections? You want to make connections to your core content. Media literacy doesn't have to be a thing you sit down and do at one time. You can make connections to any content area you're teaching. start small, just find something, one example, and have the students analyze it. Set clear expectations for what the students should look for. And we're going to give an example of that in a minute. Encourage your students to bring your own media. This is a great way to get students engaged with whatever they're interested in, because these same principles apply, you know, whether you're talking about history or another content area, or you're talking about popular culture or whatever, you know, whatever's trendy with students, you can use the same skills. So let's go to the next slide. All right, so this is a lot of stuff right here on the slide, but there are different forms of this, of the method to go about asking questions of media. So when you're analyzing media, oftentimes, especially with younger students, it's through the lens of asking a series of questions. Common Sense Media has a really good one, 5 questions to ask a media. This is sort of a variation on that. And so on the left column, you have the core concept that related to media literacy that you're conveying, such as all media messages are constructed, and they're constructed intentionally. Choices are being made. Some choices are being made subconsciously or consciously. Different people experience media different ways. And if you look at the middle column, key questions. So these are questions you can ask of students to kind of simplify it. Who created this message? What techniques are being used to attract my attention? That's when you get to those choices that creators are making. How do different people experience it differently? You know, you can even distill it down further, the, you know, who, what, why. And then you can, you know, adapt these to your grade level. And that's what you have on the right column, is adapted for even younger students. I think if you advance a little bit, I'm going to highlight something here. Yeah, there we go. So I'm just going to use this one as an example. So number 2, media messages are constructed using creative language with its own rules. So the question you can ask is, what techniques are being used to attract my attention? You know, what color are they using and why? You know, is this something using really bright colors, or does it have kind of dark, somber colors? And what does that mean for how it's trying to make you feel? And then for even younger students, what do you see? Just, it's that simple. Ask what you see. What do you notice or hear if it's an audio format? What do you like or dislike, and why? And, you know, even asking really basic questions like that, you can get some really great conversation going around different media. So let's jump ahead to the next slide. All right, so what techniques are being used to get your attention? So I indicated some of this. Let's go to the next one. It'll come up. One of the biggest examples is font use. You know, it's something we all see. Like, are you using Times New Roman, where it's a little formal, kind of stuffy? Let's go ahead to click forward. Yeah, refined. Oh, it's very fancy. But what about Arial? Simple, straight to business. Yeah, I think, you know, I always like to mention the default fonts in Microsoft Word. You know, how it used to be Times New Roman. I remember that. That was the default font for a long time. And then Arial, now it's Calibri, which, let's be honest, Calibri is Arial. Come on, you're not kidding anybody. You know, my graphic designer friend says, you know, serif fonts, where it has the little hooks on the end, is better for written, like printed things. If it's being read on a screen, the sans serif is better. But think about mood. Like, what's the mood? What is it trying to make you feel? What about impact? It's right there in the name. It's impact. It's big. It's dramatic. It's trying to get your attention. And then you have Comic Sans, where it's a little, it's fun. You know, it's rounded. You know, it's meant to look like a comic book. So it's kind of fun. You know, you see this a lot. You know, elementary classrooms, see it all the time. So fonts are just one example. Let's move on to another example. So these are images. Okay, so we have 3 examples here, all related to the same topic. And this is a good way to get this in the classroom, is to find multiple examples related to one topic, and then have the students analyze it. And we're gonna have an example of that in a minute. But these are all related to the environment, specifically pollution or litter in the ocean. So just take a minute, look at these, and put some thoughts in the chat on the difference on the way these are being presented. The same topic being presented 3 very different ways visually. You know, So, never mind the exact content, we're not going through and fact checking, the data here. You definitely could do that, but just thinking visually, how are they trying to make you feel? What techniques are they using?
And believe it or not, your 3rd through 5th grade students will come up with some really interesting things that they notice that you'll say, oh, wow, I hadn't thought of that.
If we had 4th graders here right now, I bet they would have more
Yes.
creative answers than I do. So you have the one at the top where it's more like it's like a political cartoon style. Of course, on the right you have an infographic, and then the bottom, it's a little more artistic, I would say.
The
So
bottom one seemed very calming, even though the trash is just floating around her.
Tsunami is comedic. The chart is informational. The woman is sad, feeling opposite complementary colors to the nature, blue greens. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, that's a good observation. Yeah, I think, the one at the top, the cartoon, it's sort of maybe just because of the format, but it's like using humor. It's using humor to get this very serious topic across. And then the one at the bottom, there's no words at all, which I think is an interesting choice. No words, but it's very well done. I'm not an artist, but I think it looks great. It's really well drawn. It uses a lot of color, but all the colors I think are kind of muted. They're not super bright in your face. And then of course the one on the right, the infographic, also very well designed, well drawn, very data heavy, very wordy. This isn't necessarily saying one is better than the other, just very different methods to get the idea across. Let's look at another example. Go ahead, go to the slide. Yeah, here we go. People who analyze media messages love cereal boxes. Oh, and somebody says the infographic is less emotional. Yeah, I like that. Different ways to appeal to people. Some people are, respond better to an emotional appeal. Some people respond better to numbers and data. It's all about how you tell the story. Excellent, I like that. What about these examples? So clearly geared towards kids. Well, let's dive a little deeper. What do you notice about these? Even when we switched to this slide, it was so bright. I had to look away for a second compared to the previous one. So bright colors. Everyone has their mouths open. I didn't even notice that. Oh, I love that.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I see some. Hold on. I need to scroll up a little bit. Bright colors, fun, adventure, different fonts. Eyes and mouth are open. Exclamation points. Yeah. It's meant to be exciting. Yeah, you see things like new recipe, 20% more free. So you can see they're appealing to parents and children. You have cartoon character, bright colors, appealing to the child, but then you have 20% more free, appealing to the parents and their budget. They're all handing you food. Have you noticed that? They're all handing you food. Sounds like Honey Smacking Good. They're great. Yeah, you can almost hear it. Yeah, so the eyes are wide open. The eyes are also looking down. Have you heard that? They look down to make eye contact with students with young kids in the aisles. I heard that once. I didn't believe it. I thought it was a conspiracy theory or a joke, but I can't help but notice it. I see it every time. They're all looking down. Yeah, they're meant to grab your attention. You have a full aisle of cereal. They need to catch your eye. So they use these production techniques to get attention and to stand out on the shelves. So of course they're making the food itself look good. They're making conscious choices about fonts, about the color, about the design. These are things that, a lot of thought goes into these. And of course here, the why of it is pretty clear. They want you to buy the cereal. like I said before, it's appealing to parents and students. I like the Frosted Flakes in the middle where it says it's a good source of vitamin D. They always find one thing to make it sound healthy. You get your vitamin D. So yeah, well, we could spend a lot of time talking about cereal actually, but let's move on to the next one. Okay, so we're gonna give a couple specific lessons related to media analysis. So we're gonna start with Debbie's example. If you go forward one slide, and you can click that link to pull up her lesson. So I'll pass it off to Debbie.
Okay, so in 4th grade, which is what I taught, we have teach about the boarding school situation with the Native Americans. And so we came up with 4 different articles or artifacts, I should say, some videos, some pictures. And with those questions that Nick was talking about, the students really I had given them all the background knowledge about the Native American boarding school situation and what happened. And I had read them picture books and we had read about it. And so they had background knowledge, please know that, but it's part of our curriculum. So now we wanted to look at these news articles, or if you would scroll down just a little, there should be a picture. That picture. I don't know if we can zoom in a little bit. I have no idea if it would let me do that. But we had them look at these 2 pictures side by side, and they are the same, or the students discovered they're the same rooms, they're the same boys, but they all the different clothing that they have on, and they just were really. They dug deep. They knew what was happening. They understood how the one side was what they were before and what after going to the boarding school. So the students really looked at these different examples. We had a news article, we had this picture, I can't even remember what we did, but they really looked deeper into this, analyzing what was presented to them. They were given this information and they just dug deeper, just like you all did with the cereal. Now they had to do the same with those pictures or the video.
Sorry, Debbie. I was trying to maximize it, and now I'm making everyone dizzy with this slideshow. Sorry about that.
Let's just stop for a quick recap. Okay. No. Oh no, you're getting a Zoom warning too now. Okay. That makes me really nervous. No, okay. Yeah.
But so use a topic that you have in your classroom. That's what we did. We chose a topic in our classroom. We're still analyzing because this is what the students needed to learn, but we picked a topic and we dug deeper into it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to make. We're giving examples of different media, but this is something you can include in any content area. Yes. Anything you can find media related to it, you can talk about, use these subjects. So let's go to a next example. If you go ahead 2 slides to the next one, the blue one. Yeah. So here's another example. So this is from one of the media literacy certified educators who use the same media analysis technique for the movie Frozen 2. So this teacher chose something that she knew her students were interested in. They didn't analyze the movie itself. They didn't just sit down and watch the movie and talk about it. They used different forms of media surrounding the movie. So if we go to the next slide, you can see they took the questions, they adapted them a little bit, but it's the same basic idea. And let's go ahead one more slide. So they started with the movie trailer. Super quick, just get it on YouTube and ask those questions. What choices are they making in this trailer to get your attention? I'm sure they used music to make it sound dramatic. They had a couple funny moments. They really, the point is to get you excited about it. So let's go to the next slide. They did the movie poster. So like the trailer, created by Disney. So, the motive is pretty clear. They want you to see this movie. But they looked at what characters are depicted, which character is front and center. How do they make these decisions? You look at the colors they're using. Let's go to the next slide. And what they did with the poster was they used the app called Seesaw, which you might be familiar with, or maybe not. It's where you can upload photos and they have the students annotate them. So they had the students, you can see kind of note where on the poster that catches your attention, and then add comments, which is a great interactive way to analyze an image. And let's go to the next slide. The next media was the official Twitter page for the movie, which is interesting. You know, what images are they choosing to share? You can see they're sharing awards that they've won, clips from the movie, quotes, really building, it's marketing, right? It's meant to build anticipation. Let's go one more slide. So they did have one media that was not created by Disney. This is a YouTube video from a young girl who reviewed the movie. So they analyzed this, what is she doing? What choices is she making? She's not officially affiliated with Disney. What are her motives? So she's sharing her enthusiasm for the movie. If we go one more slide, you can see what the students came up with. So she uses images to get your attention. It's very kid friendly. It's very YouTube-y, has that YouTube style. She has over 1 million views. They asked the question, does everyone feel the same way? And they, judging by the comments, no. Surprise. Why did they make this? She's getting her opinion out there about this movie, young movie reviewer. But maybe she's trying to get more attention. She has 1 million views. That doesn't happen by accident most of the time. It's very intentional. So that's one example. Let's move on to a few tips here in the next screen. So these are some tips that come from KQED. Choose high interest or relevant topics. So that's what we've been talking about, something that's high interest to the students or relevant to what you're already teaching. You can make it super easy. Start with media that students are already seeing. So things like TV commercials, cereal boxes, if you are doing more kind of popular culture or things outside of your content areas. Build connections to curriculum content. Yeah, we talked about that. And make it a habit. Keep doing it. Like I said at the beginning, these are skills that are learned and practiced. So keep it going. And really, I like to tip it right at the end. Keep the conversation going. I mean, you never know where these conversations are going to go, but it can be a lot of fun.
And they'll bring it up too. They'll bring it up. They'll remember what they did in a specific section, and they'll say, "Oh, do you remember that applies here?" They'll just remember. We did it with the American Revolution after we did it with the boarding school, and the students were able to apply the same information or the same skills, just a whole totally new topic.
All right, so talked about code of conduct as an introductory way to start with media literacy. We talked about evaluating information a little bit and searching. And then we talked about analyzing media. So now we're going to move into making media for the second half. And, I should say this, we're just doing a broad overview of each of these topics. There's a lot here, a lot related to media literacy. So hopefully it just gives you a taste and makes it accessible, especially as we're talking about making media, which is something that can be intimidating. But hopefully we can make the point that it might be easier than you think if you haven't done it. And there are some really practical ways of doing it. So let's go to the next slide. First media, we're going to talk about infographics. I mean, everybody loves infographics. They're a pretty accessible thing to create, both as an educator or even students creating them too. So basically infographics, it's a way you're taking information or data or words and you're simplifying it into a very visually engaging format. So you can see this example here, just where food comes from. So picture of a farm, packaging, processing, distribution, pretty straightforward. So if you want to make infographics or have your students make infographics, there's a few things to keep in mind. Let's go to the next slide. So not to go super in depth, but just looking at different formats. This is just a sampling. To help you, I'll talk a little bit about different software and apps to use to make infographics, and they often have templates for you to fill in. But you could do, a side-by-side comparison if you're comparing or contrasting two different things, or you just have one with a lot of data. I like the roadmap timeline one, where you think about where, the viewer's eye goes, often starting in the top left, right? Just if you're reading left to right, draw the eye, think about the path of the eye as it goes over the infographic. Let's go to the next slide and show some examples. So Debbie, this is your examples.
Yes, actually the one of our favorite projects we did was this book snap, which was really just a little snippet of a book that they were reading. So they had to read a book, and so I came up with this infographic, used Canva. It's pretty self-explanatory. These are the steps that they were going to do to create their media. So they had to read the text, they had to come up with a picture from within the text, they had to mark up that picture with some information, they could create little text boxes, and they had to create this visual, which we'll show you in just a minute. But this was my way of practicing. So I had to practice it first. So I had to create all the steps. We practiced those steps. We didn't just send them out, but this was a graphic that I used to help teach them. And if you could click on the one that says for the teacher with sample, hopefully that's still a good link. Nope.
I'm sorry, where are you saying, Debbie?
No, where it says making media for the teacher with sample.
Oh, sorry, yes. Mm-hmm.
That's okay. Oh, every time. Oh my goodness. And slide down just a little bit. And then hold on. I think it's right in the that where it's got, whoops. That presentation doesn't like us.
You're still there, Jamie. It just stopped sharing.
Here we go.
We'll try again. Wow.
Okay, back.
All right, so let's slide up just a little bit. Sorry about that. Okay, so in that, with the top window, slide down a little bit. Do you see it?
Oh, okay, yes. Mm-hmm.
Right there, slide down just a little bit.
Keep going.
There it is. So that's a book snap. So that's what I created for a book that I read to my students. I took a little snapshot from the book. I highlighted it. I told them what I was thinking, why I was thinking that. So they had to give me some information. This is all skills that my students have to have. It was just another way for them to display those skills. Okay. So then there was another link on that previous slide.
Okay.
Jump through.
Oh, wow. It's interesting that it went back. Okay.
I know, that's weird that it went there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, that one right there. And now you're going to slide all the way to the bottom. And then do Art of Keeping Cool. Oh, actually, there it says Student Artifact. So hopefully this works. So there's a little button that to, oops, yeah, a little play button.
Mm-hmm.
Click on that. Oh, all the way at the bottom.
This one.
That one. So.
Hi, my name is Evan, and I read The Art of Keeping Cool. I put the first paragraph there because, I think that you should not judge a book by its cover. I think that is, the main idea of this book because, everybody was judging Abel Hoffman, too fast, and they really didn't know who he actually was. I put the fire in the painting there because they burned down all of his paintings when they thought he was a spy and they were just not, having a good, they were not treating him well. I put the second paragraph there because you have to make a lot of hard choices when you move into a new place and not a lot of people think highly of you. So what I did is I put it where a scene where the people on the sidewalk beat him up, and then he had a choice to fight back or he could let it happen. I put the fist there because
You can
he
click
like
stop
to
now.
resemble like the fighting back that he could have.
Thank you. So Evan read this book. He read it in a group, but this was his interpretation of this book snap. And he had to come up with the passages. He had to come up with the graphics that filled in. Again, we went through the steps. He had to practice, and he really had to explain everything. So it's like having a conversation, but he created media. And then I was able to put that on our classroom website for everybody to look and see. So all the parents could see it, his grandparents could see it. And this was their way of creating media for other people. And that was total buy-in from the kids.
All right, let's go to the next slide. So as we're creating media, just to show real quick, I won't go super in depth into all these options, but if you are looking at creating something like infographics, these are some of the options. I know Canva is super popular. It's free. Canva has just an overwhelming amount of options.
Yes.
They have templates that you can fill in. It makes it super easy. So if you've never made an infographic before, just go to Canva. Super easy. And there's some other options too. And we'll share the slides afterwards. So I won't go through each one individually.
And prior to Canva, years ago, we used Google Slides. So it can be done.
Yeah, you can do a lot with Google Slides. So let's go over to audio and video. Let's go one more slide. So yeah, basically, these are two formats really conducive to storytelling. And there's a lot you can do with them, both in terms of content, but also in terms of, you could do something super in depth, or you could do something real quick and easy. You could do fiction, nonfiction, interviews, narratives. You can explain things. Audio is maybe a little more accessible, or usually perceived as more accessible than video, where it's a little more focused on the writing and the story, and obviously not on the visuals. Let's go forward one more slide and talk a little bit about audio. Audio, it's a great way to really connect students and focus a little bit on literacy, on writing, storytelling, editing, as they're scripting things. And it's a really great entry point. And really it allows the students to elevate their own voices and do things in their own words, depending on the format you're using. And I'm going to show one example on the next slide of a template. They call it podcasting for elementary students. Any audio project is called a podcast now, right? But basically you're recording people's voices. This is from the Learning Network, which is part of the New York Times. This template to fill out wasn't originally intended for elementary schools necessarily, but I think it's the type of thing you should really think about, because planning it in advance is really the important part. Everybody, whether it's audio or video, everybody wants to hit record. Well, people get nervous about it, but they still want to do it. They want to hit record, but what the professionals call pre-production, the planning that goes before it, 90% of the work happens before you hit record, is what they say. So something like this, where you have the topic, the question you're answering, do you have a narrator? Are you interviewing someone? What's the story you're telling? Is this a personal story where it's just one individual telling their story? Is it almost like journalism, where the students are exploring a question and then they choose to interview someone? Make those decisions. Do you need additional sounds and audio? And how do you do those things? I'm going to talk about one example that I think is a great entry point on the next slide, and that is doing interviews. Everyone has a story to tell, right? That sounds like a cliche, but no matter who they are, they have something interesting to say. If you interview them, have the students interview people, each other, interviews teachers. It's always fun to do an interview. You know, there's a lot of skills involved in writing good interview questions. If you look online, there's some great resources for writing good interview questions, like open-ended questions versus closed-ended questions, things like that. You can do it super short and quick. And, you know, I'm going to make this point for audio and video. You don't need a lot of equipment. You know, I hear from teachers, you know, we bought a ton of equipment, or we can't afford the expensive cameras. You don't need that stuff. That buying stuff like that is the last step. It's not the first step in doing media production. You know, if you are doing the editing or having the students do the editing, there are options. I know some teachers use GarageBand, which is on Macs, Audacity, WeVideo. I know a lot of educators use WeVideo for video and audio. You know, you can edit audio in there too, and they have some great kind of like stock footage library. You can add in sounds and video and photos right on top of it.
All we had was our Chromebooks, and we used WeVideo. That was it. Those two things.
Yeah, you know, don't get too caught up in different software. You know, chances are you have access to something like WeVideo. If it's not WeVideo, there's something else you probably have access to. Keep it simple. And, you know, that's kind of the point I'm going to make with video. So if you go to the next slide. Okay, so first, educator created video. So before we talk about student video, a great way to start is by creating your own. You know, here, this is just a few examples. Are you explaining a concept? You could do a narrated slideshow. I mentioned Google Slides earlier. You could do Google Slides with voiceover over it, you know, or do like a photo montage. You could do screencasts where you record your screen and walk people through it, through you know, whatever you're talking about. You can just film yourself on your phone, like selfie. Just film yourself talking about something, or interview someone. On the next slide, I have an example. This is kind of a fun example. So this is from an educator who was having students pitch news stories. So she kind of dressed herself up as a newsroom editor and then added in some clips. So take a look.
Students reflect on options for summer camp. Yeah, definitely. Oh, hello 5D. Just going through the rundown for tonight's newscast. Thanks for being on time for our meeting. So Ms. D has filled me in on your progress in the newsroom, and it sounds like you all have really interesting story ideas. Now comes the hard part. To get your story on the air, it needs to get past me. That's right, I am your story editor, which means you need to convince me to greenlight your story so you can start to shoot and edit it. By the end of this week, you're going to record and send me a 1-minute pitch of your story telling me why it's so great. Easy? Maybe, but you'll need to include a few things to really get that thumbs up. Have a listen to some of my friends at the Associated Press, the AP, who will give you some tips. Are you taking notes? Good thinking.
When you pitch a story to me, give me 2 sentences maybe, but after that, I'm going to throw a lot of questions your way. I'm going to want to know about the people in the story, the background of the story. You need to have all that information in your hands and know it like clockwork.
We joke about 25 words or less, but it really helps if you can explain what is the theme, what is the meaning of your story.
Theme, meaning. Sound familiar? Yes, just like you studied this year. What is the lesson? What big message will we learn from this story? How is it relevant to us and to our lives? Good. Next.
When we need to tell a story, you need to have characters. You need to have people that take unusual concepts or difficult concepts and make it easy for the viewer to understand.
Characters. You guys are experts at this. Who is going to tell your story? And more importantly, who can best tell your story? Who can you interview to make this story come alive? Is there someone who has already learned the lesson or theme of the story and can tell us about that experience?
Think of movies. Stories that have drama, that have conflict or contrast. Contrast in a story is Republicans versus Democrats, government versus special interests, Yankees versus Red Sox.
And you want to make sure that when you put that story together, when you edit that story together, that you do so in a really truthful, honest manner, that you're representing the different interests of those people you've spoken with and events that you've seen honestly.
John makes a really important point. Yes, you're the reporter, so you are in charge of telling it, but you have a responsibility, a really important one, to make sure you are telling the story in a way that represents how your characters feel and what they actually experienced. Keep that one in the back of your mind because you're going to need it later on. Okay, last point. Ready?
Always want to try to think visually. We all know terrific video. Terrific video is fire, floods, tornadoes, but beyond that, think of what your first shot is going to be when you're telling a story. Very often your first shot should be your best shot. So when you pitch me that story, you tell me the shot I'm thinking about is this guy doing this. If it really works, we'll know right away.
Okay, journalists, you've got some pointers from the experts. I expect your 1-minute pitch videos to me by the end of the week. Show me what you got.
Yeah, so, you know, you don't have to be quite as ambitious as getting in character, but I think she made a lot of great points in that video. And she did that with WeVideo. You could see the WeVideo watermark, which means she had the free version of WeVideo. And I'm willing to bet she didn't have a green screen behind her. That was probably just a virtual background like in Zoom. You know, super easy, super accessible. So if you're looking at student created video, you know, it's just like anything else. So think about your instructional goals. You know, don't think about the technical skills. You know, chances are your goal isn't to teach students, you know, the composition of a video. It's to teach, you know, a content. You know, what skills are you really looking at here? So start with that. You know, work backwards from there. Structure your story, and like I said before, pre-planning, plan it out before hitting record. Let's go to the next slide to give another example. So yeah, when you're making student video, there's so much variation. On the right, I have that's a nice little infographic showing a timeline for media production. That's a 6-week project. That's pretty big. It doesn't have to be that big. You know, you could do a project that's an entire semester long, or you could do one that's a couple days. You know, you could keep it short as you want, or as long as you want. So, you know, think about that. Think about group work. It's a great group activity, great project. And peer feedback is great too. You know, it's a great way for students to show off their work. If you do, you know, a longer project, have something at the end. That's my advice. Have a screening, make it a big deal, get the biggest screen you can, or project it anywhere you can, really make a big deal about it. Share it out if you're able to. So that's my advice for student video. Let's go.
And they'll want to work on it forever. So we did science videos, and we had Project Lead the Way, and so every quarter end or whatever unit we were on, there was always a video that the groups would make, and they would want to keep working on it. And you're like, okay, but I have to grade it. At some point, you got to put a stop to, you know, you got to say, okay, it's done. But they'll want to stand in for recess to work on it, because that's how invested they are in it.
Yeah. Projects are never really finished. You just hit the deadline. It's just like a workplace. Let's go to the next slide for some more specific things. So these are just some considerations and options for video. So, you know, you might have used some of these before. I haven't used all these personally, just to put this out there. You could do things like Flipgrid is really popular for students to share short video clips. Screencastify for recording your screen. Honestly, you could do it in Zoom. Just share your screen, be in a Zoom room alone, share your screen, record it. And then for editing, things like iMovie, Windows has a free version. But, you know, like we said, WeVideo, super popular. Adobe has some free options. Canva does have some video editing capabilities if you dive deep into that. And then on the right, this is also from KQED, just some options or some things to think about as you're choosing software. Does your district have a subscription? I've heard from teachers there, their district had subscriptions, they didn't even know it. It turns out they had all these options. And then of course, terms of service, do they comply with student privacy laws? What does your district say about that? Talk to your IT department. Do students log in? All those different things. Think about, we would call it workflow. That's what producers call it. Where are you saving things? How are you managing footage? Although, have all those things planned out. So just feel like we talked a lot, but just to wrap up, there are all kinds of media literacy. We covered a lot of ground. We just scratched the surface of this topic called media literacy. But I do just want to make the point, you can implement this in any subject area. It's pretty rare to have a media literacy unit like just on its own. You can implement it throughout your teaching, and really think about media creation, because it really does add a whole nother level. When you're thinking about analyzing media, analyzing information, putting students in the role of media creation really gets them to think about it in a whole new light. So let's see, we have a couple things at the end. Feel free to, give us any questions. We do have a survey. If we could put that link in the chat as well. And then let's go to the next slide too.
Oh, sorry, Nick.
That's fine. We're just wrapping up. If anybody has any questions, feel free, put them in the chat or unmute yourself while you do think about that. We're PBS Wisconsin. If you're not familiar with us, we have a variety of media we make ourselves. Whatever you're teaching, I do want to highlight the ways in Wisconsin First Nations. If you're teaching Wisconsin's Indigenous history, which I hope you are, we have lots of resources related to that. We have two computer games, perfect for your grade level. We have Joe Wilder and the Capital Case, which is a kind of a history mystery. And then we have Legend of the Lost Emerald, where you explore historic shipwrecks in the Great Lakes and learn a little bit about history that way. And of course, we have Wisconsin biographies. If you're teaching grades 3 through 5, you should definitely be looking at Wisconsin biographies. Well-known, not so well-known people from Wisconsin history, short animated videos. These are great. There's new ones coming out all the time. And let's go forward another slide. This is PBS Learning Media. So this is an online platform. Basically, it's a website with educational resources for PBS stations all over the country. This is where I got the Ruff Ruffman video and other resources. So whatever topic you're teaching, you can find something here. There's really an overwhelming amount of resources available on PBS Learning Media. And if you go one more slide, I will mention our newsletter. So you can learn about webinars. When we create media, we create it with educators. So Debbie has been on advisory teams for some of our media. We're always looking for more educators. So if you sign up for a newsletter, you too can volunteer to learn how to help, or you can help us create classroom media. And then you can also find us on social media as well. And then at the last slide, if you go forward one last time, we're going to say thank you and share my email address. So you can always let me know. I'm always curious what educators are doing with media or media literacy. Feel free to let me know what you're up to, or if you have questions for other resources, or you want to share resources you have. I'm always interested in learning more. So that's the end of our webinar. We can stick around a couple minutes if there's any questions, but otherwise, have a good night.
Could you put the survey in the chat?
Oh yeah,
The link.
Survey. Yeah, I'll get the link. 1 second.
I've got it, Nick. Thank you. I just didn't. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, the surveys really do help us out. We're planning more and more webinars. We're planning more and more media literacy, professional development. So we really, really do value your feedback.
And I can, again, the resources are just absolutely amazing. It's one of the reasons why I'm a retired teacher, but yet still wanting to be involved, because the resources are just that amazing. Wisconsin Biographies is what hooked me. My kids absolutely love the 2 games. I use the First Nations in my teaching. So the resources are there if you need them.
And Debbie, thinking about that fabulous project that you shared with us, I'm curious, how long did it take students to develop something that detailed?
Not as long as you think, believe it or not, because along the way, they knew along the way to be looking for passages that made them think. So we would do that. They would read a certain section. I'm going to say 3 weeks, but they had to read the book. They have book discussions. They had to slowly create their Canva, which is what they started with. And then we spent maybe a week by the time we got them in and out of the library in a quiet room, recording their piece. And, you know, so maybe tops 4 weeks, but that was also the actual reading of the book, the actual digging for the information and explaining it, all part of my lessons. None of this was extra other than them recording. That was the only extra piece there. They still had to think, they still had to show me an example. So it doesn't have to be a big deal. It can be, don't get me wrong. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. It's timing.
Thank you.
And the kids loved it. They loved sharing it. They loved telling their parents about it. We did a Google site, and I just put all their stuff on the Google site. We talked about not putting in their last names because we were sharing it. All of those kinds of, you know, safety issues.
And I imagine years from now, that's one of the things they will really remember about their time with you in that class. That's fantastic.
Well, they just last week talked to the 5th grade teacher at my old school, and the kids remember doing the Emerald, the video game, the Emerald, last year. And so she is taking that at the next stop. They're playing it, but now they're digging into other shipwrecks, and they're learning more about that piece of history. But the kids that were in my classroom remember playing that game. So now they got their classmates hooked on it. So there's ways to step it up. You know, yes, we played the game, they understood it, but we can now step that up a little bit more.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. If there aren't any more questions, we'll say goodnight.
Thank you, everyone.